Hello guys and welcome back to Controls Hero. Today I have a Metasys tutorial on lead lag and we will be doing a weekly lead lag for 3 pumps based on a specific day of the week and time, and we'll make those adjustable. And I want to start by showing you how this lead lag works. So first of all, we have 3 analog points: pump lead, weekday, and hour. And the pump lead tells you which pump is running, either 1, 2, or 3, and it changes every week. So the order that we have right now is 1, 2, and 3, and after the 3rd week, it's gonna switch back to pump 1, and then pump 2, and so on. Now, the weekday and hour defines when the lead lag is gonna execute. For example, the weekday, I have numbers. So 1 equals Monday, 2 equals Tuesday, 3 Wednesday, and so on. So right now I have a Tuesday to execute my lead lag every Tuesday. And at what time? Right now I have it at 5 a.m. So this is from 0 to 23. So 0 is 12 a.m., 23 it's 11 p.m. So, and here I put a little description so you understand. And here I have a binary point, the lead lag trigger. So this executes once a week for 5 seconds. And based on which pump is currently running, it's gonna trigger one of these 3 interlocks, which in turn every interlock commands one of the 3 pumps. And finally, we have a lead lag control system, which is this one right here. And it's the one in charge of executing my trigger point once a week. And this is how it works. I have a time module where I'm picking up the current hour of the day, and I'm picking up the DOW, day of the week. So in this case, today's Sunday, which is number 7, and it's 14 hours, which is 2 p.m. And what I'm doing, I'm comparing the current time and day of the week to my hour and my week of the day where I want my lead lag to trigger. So basically I have an equal comparator. So basically if my time equals the hour that I want, and I have an AND gate, my day of the week matches the day of the week I wanted to trigger, it's just gonna execute a timer. And this is a pulse. This is a 5-second pulse. So when both of my conditions are true, basically the timer is gonna be showing a 1 for 5 seconds and it's gonna go back to 0. So that's the trigger point. And now let's look what's inside my interlocks. So we have interlock definition and an action table. And if you're not familiar with interlocks, make sure you watch my other video tutorial about Metasys interlocks. Okay, so my first interlock is looking at 2 conditions to happen in order to trigger, and it's an AND. So these 2 must happen. So my first condition is my pump lead, which is this guy right here. My second condition is my trigger, which my trigger, as you know, it executes once a week for 5 seconds. So my first interlock wants to set pump 1 as the lead. So that's why it's looking for pump 3 to be the lead. So basically if pump 3 is the lead and my lead lag triggers, this is gonna become true. So remember that if my pump lead is a 3, we want to go back to 1. So that's why my pump 1 interlock is looking at pump 3 lead. Okay, so here's the tricky part. These 2 conditions are gonna be true only for 5 seconds once a week. So under my action tables, that means that my true condition is gonna be true for 5 seconds and then it's gonna go back to false. And we want to rotate our pump from 3 to 1 5 seconds after the interlock is disabled. And that's exactly 5 seconds after my trigger goes to off. And why? So we want to avoid having the other interlocks execute and switching your pumps right away to a different number. So we do all of our commands in the false condition. So this pump lead is actually this point. And the second point we're commanding is our CCT point, or actual lead in the CCT. But if you don't have lead lag in CCT, you can also command your pumps. You can add those pumps to the false condition. And finally, here you can see my other 2 interlocks: pump 2 interlock definition, pump 2 action tables, pump 3 definitions, and pump 3 action tables. Okay, so let me demonstrate the lead lag in action. So right now you see that our current pump lead is number 1. So we expect pump 2 to trigger. So then let's look at the interlock number 2. And if we go to our interlock definition, we can see that we need to have our pump lead equal 1, which this is the case, and our trigger point is gotta be on. So our trigger point is not on, but once that happens, we will see that after the 5 seconds off, we're gonna execute the second pump. So let's just simulate that today is Tuesday at 5 in the morning. So I'm just gonna command my trigger point. I'm just gonna override it to on, and then send the command, and you will see that my interlock 2 is true. And nothing is going to happen because we're in the true condition. When it happens is when we go back to false. So let's go and release this. Release operator override to off. And after 5 seconds, my pump lead should switch to pump 2. And there you go, pump 2. Now let's test it in a different way. So I'm gonna go to my control system and see what conditions need to happen in order to trigger my trigger point. So basically right now we are at 16 hours and it's Sunday. So these two must match. So let's just make that happen. So I'm gonna make my day 7, my weekday. So this should switch to 7, and now it became true. So we gotta meet the other condition now. Hour should be 16. So let's adjust, right click command, adjust my hour to 16, send the command, and it's gonna be true. So it's gonna trigger my third interlock for 5 seconds, and then it's gonna go back to false. And 5 seconds after going back to false, it's gonna switch my pump to 3. And there you go, it works. And note that my weekday is gonna be true for 24 hours for the full day, but my hour is gonna be true only for 1 hour. So this and is gonna be, every week is gonna be good for 1 hour, it's gonna be true, but since we have a pulse, a 5-second pulse, that means that these two conditions only happens for 5 seconds once a week. And finally, in order to get from pump 3 back to pump 1, or pump 1 interlock should trigger. So let's see if we can meet those conditions. And I go to my interlock definition, and it says that pump lead must be equal to 3. So we're at 3, and the trigger is gonna be on. So let's just really quick trigger that manually. So operator override, on, send. So this is gonna become true, and obviously this trigger is gonna be for 5 seconds. So let's just release it. Release operator override, and after 5 seconds being off, it's gonna command my pump lead to 1, back to 1. And there you go. This is how this weekly lead lag works. Now I am going to show you how to create every single object step by step. So let's get started. Okay, I'm going to start by creating a new folder. And I'll give it the name pumps lead lag. And I'll double click on the folder, and I'll be creating all the objects in here. With my folder highlighted, I'm gonna create or insert a new object. And this will be my pump lead status. So I'm gonna pick an analog value. Go next, next. I'll give it the name PMP-lead and give it some description. And here we want to leave our units blank because there's no units for the number of pumps. And as my minimum and maximum value, this is important. I only want to allow the number 1 as my minimum, the number 3 as my maximum, because we only have 3 pumps, 1, 2, and 3. And display precision, I don't want decimals, so I'm just gonna go to 1s. And increments, we want increments of 1. So I'm just gonna put 1. My default, very important, my default pump, I want to start with 1. And then go to last and finish. And if you wanna create a trend, you can do so. If not, just click done. And now we have our point created right here. Double click on the folder. Now my next point is going to be my lead lag trigger. So I'm going to go insert object again. And this is going to be a binary value because this is just going to be a off on. So go next, give it a name. Next, some description if you want. And I guess I'm just going to choose off on as my units. And just go last and finish. And done. Next, I want my weekday point. So that's gonna be an analog value. AB, next. And I can give it some description. And remember that the number 1 means Monday. That's per Metasys. So just put that. Number 7 is Sunday. So 1 through 7 are the only values that we want here. So I'm just gonna put here as my minimum value 1 and maximum 7. So if you wanna pick 8, Metasys won't let you. It will give you an error. We don't want anything as units. We want change of value increments of 1. So 1, 2. You don't want to put a 1.1, 1.5 day. And for my default value, I want 2 for Tuesday. So I'm gonna go last and finish. My next point is gonna be the time. So it's gonna be an object and it's gonna be an analog value. So the time, I'll just name it hour. And I'll put a description that makes sense. So with the hour, the number 0 is my 12 a.m. My number, let's say 20 is 8 p.m. 23 is 11 p.m. So 24, there's no 24 because that will be 0 for 12 a.m. So our range is gonna be 0 through 23. Again, no units for time or the hour. COB, we want increments of 1 hour. And my default, let's say we want to start at 5 in the morning. And last, finish. And now let's create our control system. So I'm just gonna go insert control system, not an object. I'm gonna go next. Give it a name. Last and finish. Now double click on it. Click edit. And we'll start creating the fun part. Now I like to start by bringing all the inputs and outputs that I'm going to need. So to do that, I'm going to attributes and I will be picking input reference or output reference because I'm going to be referencing the points that I want. Let's pick my trigger output. So I'm just gonna click on it, highlight it, and I'm just gonna click and drag output reference, and I'm gonna put it on the far right. And now to bring my inputs, the same thing. So I can just select my hour and just bring it. Or we can do it this way. I can click multiple inputs. In this case, my hour, control click in my weekday, and then I'm just gonna click and drag input, and I have my 2 inputs. Next, we need to bring our time module. So it's gonna be under timing and time. I'm just going to click and drag. Now I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Just like that. Now I want to compare my hour and weekday points to the actual time and day of the week. And to do so, I go to control and I pick this equal module, which is an equal comparator. Then I'll pick a second one. And I'll just connect my actual time here with my hour and my day of the week here and my weekday here. And the DF stands for differential, so we don't need any differential. So I'm just gonna add a constant, a float, and I'll just make it a 0. And I can also hide the lines. So I'm gonna right click and hide. And since it's a 0, I like to name it 0. So I'll double click on it and just name it 0. And now I want both of these conditions to be true. So I'm gonna go to my Boolean and just gonna pick an AND Boolean gate. Just connect. And then when these two conditions are true, I want them to last for 5 seconds to trigger a timer. So I'm going to go to timing, timer, drag it over, and click here, make the connection, and I got to make sure it's a pulse. So by default, it's a 5-second pulse. So that's exactly what we want. So I'm just going to click OK. And for my reset RS, I don't need anything, so I'm just gonna put a 0. So I'm just gonna connect my 0 constant over here. And finally, I'm going to connect my timer output to my actual trigger. So I'm just gonna do a straight connection. And for priority, I like to do priority 14 for my logic. Click OK, and I'm just gonna rearrange a little bit. And finally, I am going to save. And the last objects I need to create are my interlocks and my 3 pumps interlock. So I'm just gonna go to insert object and I'll pick interlock. Next. And I'll give it a name and a description. And what I like to do, I like to skip the interlock definition and action tables and just add it at the very end. And I'm gonna repeat for pump 2 and pump 3 interlocks. And there you have it. We have all of our objects that we need, so we just need to finish programming or setting up the 3 interlocks. So I'm going to double click on my first interlock, pump 1, and then I'm going to go to interlock definition and go to edit. And the conditions are going to trigger this interlock are my pump lead status and my trigger point. Since we want to start pump 1, we must have pump 3 as the lead. So remember that it rotates from 3, goes back to 1. So we want 3 on that, and we always want the trigger to be on. And then I click save. Now going to my action tables, I'll click edit, and I'll pick a priority here. So I like to do 14. Oh, right there. And then remember that we want our pump to switch under the false condition. So first point I'll bring is my pump lead status. So if I just drag it over, see what's going to happen. You'll add it under the false conditions and the true condition. So we don't want it under the true condition. So I'm just going to click on it and click the negative sign. The other way is just to uncheck this. So you only add the point wherever you want it. And we want to leave my pump adjust to 1. And then my delay is going to be after 5 seconds. And my next point is going to be my pump lead inside CCT. So in CCT is where the rotation happens. So I'll just bring this point and adjust it to 1 because we want to switch to pump 1 and 5 seconds. But if you didn't have this logic in CCT that is gonna rotate the pumps, what you can do is to bring all of the hardware points for the pumps and just command your pump 1 to start and the rest to stop. Like that's another way to, it depends how you have set up your application. So in my case, I don't need to do this. So I'm just gonna delete those points and I'm just gonna click save and we're done with interlock 1. And in a similar way, we can set up our other 2 interlocks. And for our pump lead, we want pump 1 to be the lead. Trigger on, save. When it's lead and it triggers, we want to switch to pump 2, right? And that's pump 2 interlock. Now let's finish up pump 3. For pump 3, we must have the pump lead at 2. This on as always. And that's set for pump 3 interlock. Alright, so we are done setting up our 3 pumps lead lag from scratch. This is the end of this Metasys tutorial, and if you have any questions or comments, please let me know below. And finally, if you think this tutorial was helpful, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much, and I'll see you on the next one.